presentation, it will have to be in quotes because I usually just give an impromptu thing, whatever's happening in the Mothman world. So I heard some of that is his name Alan? Alan. My take on the aliens is a little different. I mean, I do understand that it appears to be that we have extraterrestrials, and being sort of a John Keel aficionado, we need to come up with a name for people that follow Keelian, I guess. I'm a Keelian, so the ET hypothesis is a little bit complicated. I think it's certainly the case that some of these abductions are being staged by humans. So you have to always consider whether or not human players were involved. And none of the stuff he said was incorrect in the sense that some of them are interested in genetics, and they are interested in, I can't remember some of the other things, but some of the research in the last year involves if there are human players involved in some of the abductions, who are they? Because last year when I was here, we just sort of figured out that who some of these players might be, and it tended to go toward the ex-Nazis, people that had saucer technology during World War II, and there's some evidence that some of that technology was transferred not only to America, but maybe to West Virginia. So in the last year, we've seen a few more clues come up pointing in that direction. And I just put together 3 volumes of Keel articles from the 60s, where you see more and more pieces of information that point toward human players trying to, assuming there is some kind of real ancient phenomenon where, quote, aliens are able to shape-shift and all that, there are humans who are trying to mimic that for some reason, and it's very clever, and there's obviously a move to make people believe more and more in aliens coming from official circles, and this is really what the UFO history is about. And you can sort of see where it's led, because today we now have drones and remote craft that fly all over and drop bombs and shoot bullets. And this, I think, is essentially what the big cover-up was. Let's make it seem like aliens, so that nobody will really figure out what's going on until it's too late, and the U.S. has the upper hand, or NATO, or whoever the power block is that wants to sort of take over the Middle East. So that was my first point on my one-page list of notes. Is that the ET cover-up was really about making sure that nobody figured out that drones were being developed. However, you still have to wonder. There is something going on that's quote real and not being done by humans. Are you hearing a feedback when I get too close? Okay. Maybe if I go like, what is that? I remember when I used to be in a band, if you go sideways, it helps. Oh, it doesn't. Any ideas? If any of you follow my blog there you go. My blog on forteanswest.com. I recently put up some pictures of a UFO sighting that I had, and I got some good pictures of it. Now, what you see in the pictures is something that does look like it's changing shape, and it's very similar to what Alan was describing. A series of lights that change color, change shape, formation. The formation changes. The one I saw went from being very long with multicolored lights to, would spin. It may have been pointing toward you, so you're just seeing the end, but then you just see one thing, it looked like a meteor actually, or a fireball. So when it moved from one spot to the other, you saw a tail, and that would stop. And at one point it looked like an exploding atom molecule or something. So, did I immediately classify that as terrestrial? No, because it might be the real phenomenon. I think the real phenomenon is more about lights in the sky that may indeed entrance you, put you into some hypnotic state, where you can then imagine that you had interactions with these beings. But I think people that are, well, there's people that repeatedly have that kind of thing happening. It doesn't, as Keel's research showed, it doesn't really mean that they're interacting with anything that you could capture. It's not like an alien, gray alien that you could capture and put in a cage. It's something more temporary and more interdimensional. But I think there's clearly some of the abduction cases are being done by these ex-Nazi types who are trying to, a lot of them went into the CIA and NASA, and so they were staging some of these abductions to make the ET thesis seem more real, again to cover up the drone development. But my sighting, I'm still not sure, which one it was. It's possible that they've now developed drones that look like shape-shifting lights, because they had something like that in the 60s, actually in the 40s. If you read some of the old saucer news articles, I have a couple of compilations of old saucer news articles at my table that you can look at. And there was a guy in the 60s, an engineer who worked at Los Alamos, who came out and said these were developed by the government too, that they could make synthetic fireballs. So we've had a spate of fireballs ever since the 50s on. And they tend to come up at certain times when political stuff's happening, that anytime they want to get your mind off some bad political news, you'll have a fireball sighting or UFO sighting. Now my sighting was just in the mountains in Washington State and didn't really tie in any political events or anything, so I'm tending to think that this was a real sighting, although it was near a naval station, so it's possible that they were testing out something that could fly above the naval station and observe what was going on. And at the same time looked like some kind of shape-shifting UFO. I'm not quite sure why they would do that, but I guess it'd be easier just to have a drone floating up there that didn't really have to do any fancy light work. But in the last year, we've had some interesting things. I know last year, we weren't aware of this sighting, but there was a sighting of Mothman here in town in August. And that was around the same time that the TNT dome blew up. And the Frick brothers and I investigated where it happened. And it was across the river at the Walmart, and then Mothman followed these ladies to their hotel. Then we checked out the hotel and realized, hey, that's right where the Silver Bridge came down. So you essentially have Mothman appearing over the Silver Bridge again just last August. And of course my research is all about trying to figure out why Mothman appears in certain spots. Is there some code that he's trying to get across? Some message? If you look at all the different spots, what do you find? What do you see? And that's, it's all speculative, we don't really know. But the trail has sort of led back to, the guys that are faking the ET abductions and things. And they may have been working out of the TNT area back in the 60s, because even though it was supposed to have been shut down then, you had half of the TNT was still in operation, and it was being used for some sort of naval reclamation project. We found that even though the Mothman UFO flap, which was the biggest ever, never appeared in the Rockefeller UFO report that they did. So I always wondered about that. Why was it just totally missing from the report? And then Ted Torbich and I think Ted's in the audience somewhere, he's got a good radio show called Stench of Truth. Ted and I found that Lawrence Rockefeller actually controls the TNT area. Probably, is he still alive? I don't know, but Lawrence Rockefeller was, along with Howard Hughes, was the biggest promoter of exotic aircraft and he was also the biggest promoter of mind control. So you have those two things come together, which would point to alien abduction and all that stuff, and also control the TNT area. So what was Mothman? Mothman was seen in the TNT area. Was he part of that whole deal? I think the research sort of shows that he wasn't. He was perhaps there to sort of, again, present clues that maybe this is what was going on. And why would that be important? Well, it might be important for people that don't want drones flying over their houses or atomic energy, because a lot of the work there apparently was atomic. And I don't know if there's anybody in the house who worked at the TNT or not, and they're probably not at liberty to tell us, but it seems to be that most people think that there was something going on there that was atomic and probably was related to Area 51. And there's a wing of this that gets into the whole JFK assassination, because some of those guys were, strangely enough, involved in UFOs. And when we were researching the TNT, we found that there was a company called Olin, which owned it or was running after the government stopped making TNT. Olin kept on doing something there, or kept owning it, and they were doing this secret Navy project. And part of their company was sold to Bulova, which has some connection to the RFK assassination, which was one of Mothman's prophecies. So Mothman seems to be pointing to things that involve these famous assassinations and atomic energy and drone development. And without getting too political about it, I mean, you just have to wonder, is this just some sort of way that people connecting to nature somehow, we see this creature, and this creature embodies information that we all want to have come out to maybe balance the scales a little bit. Because I think with the Fukushima situation, we all know that there's some danger involved with having nuclear plants, especially having them on these fault lines and next to the coast and things. And there was actually a Mothman sighting at the Fukushima plant about 2 months before it happened. At least that's the report we have. We don't know if it's true, but the person didn't really try to come out and take advantage of it, didn't want their name used and all that. So usually that means that it's a real thing and they're not trying to hoax anybody. And oddly, one of those JFK guys, actually the guy that Jim Garrison was the guy that prosecuted the one court case about JFK. He thought that the grassy knoll shooter was this guy named Fred Crisman. And we've heard that Fred Crisman was hanging around Point Pleasant, may have been one of the men in black. And Ted was doing a show with the Ken Thomas, who's the authority on the connection between JFK and UFOs. And Ken, on that show, somebody from the Cleveland UFO group said that, yeah, Crisman was investigating Woody Derenberger. And he came to our group and wanted permission to do it, and we couldn't really say no because he was, military intelligence guy. So, and John Keel said that if you were investigating UFOs and you thought it was extraterrestrials, you'd be okay. The Men in Black wouldn't bother you. But if you thought it was these ex-Nazis or the military, you'd get visits from the Men in Black and they would harass the heck out of you. So there's kind of an indication right there that they were trying to, if you inadvertently saw a UFO in this area, they would try to keep you from talking about it because the time wasn't right to come out with these drones. And again, I think Mothman was here to, maybe point toward that. And in the last year, my case, for those who don't know my history,